Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about, building trust. I've touched on this topic before, but something happened last week when I was doing a full-day sales training program. And it's one of those moments, when you say something, you go, that was pretty brilliant. That's an interesting thought you have there, Victor. And we all have moments like that, right? It's like these moments of insight where you go, that's good. And I remember I wrote this down. I actually stopped in the middle of the workshop, wrote this word down. Here's the word I wrote down: like-mindedness. Yes, I wrote that, like-mindedness. Now let me explain, because that's what this podcast is about. It's about building trust. And I realized that the key to building trust is like-mindedness. Let me explain what I mean by that. Now, I always tell the story, it's a true story, about a friend of mine named Larry. Now, I remember going with Larry on a sales visit. Now, Larry was one of these salespeople who was outselling everybody, like 10 to 1. For every 10 salespeople, he was outselling them. I mean, that's how good he was. And, people were always wondering, how does this guy sell so much? Why is he so good? And then one day, I'm hanging out with Larry. I'm shadowing him. And I remember we walked in. I'm going to give you the short version of this. We walk into this customer premise. And I remember we're looking at different equipment that Larry sells, and he says, yep, I'm familiar with that equipment, I'm familiar with that equipment. And then Larry came upon this one piece of equipment, and he says, where'd you get that piece of junk? And he didn't use the word junk, by the way. He said, where'd you get that piece of junk? And I was stunned that he said that to the customer. Like, he actually said, where'd you get that piece of junk? Imagine somebody walking into your house and says, where'd you get that piece of junk? And he said it, and immediately I was like stunned, shocked that he would say something like that. And I looked at the customer, and I wanted to see what he was, you're waiting for that reaction. And the customer says, yeah, that was a bad choice. We shouldn't have bought that. That was a bad deal. And then Larry said, yeah, I hear you, because I've been there. I've used that equipment. It's a piece of junk. And at that moment, at that very moment, you could feel this connection between the customer and Larry. And, and as I was telling the story, it really hit me that the reason you felt that connection, at least I felt that connection, and Larry did get the deal, felt that connection was that the other person, the customer said, this salesperson understands me. He's used that product, and he thinks it's junk too. He's basically validating what I thought. In other words, we're of like mind. Now, that's powerful if you think about it. What customers want from you is to know that you understand. Let me explain. If you're selling a product or a service, but let's say a product, and let's say you've used the product and you know it works, but you also know the downsides of not doing it right or not having the right product. And if you can share that with your customer, and your customer says something like, you know what, we've also had those problems. Yep, that's also happened to me. Well, that's like-mindedness. In other words, the customer knows that you feel his or her pain. And that's what selling is. When we talk about trust, is how do we establish that like-mindedness connection, right? How do I establish the fact, I get you, Mr. Customer. I feel your pain. I've been where you're at. I've gone through what you've gone through. You've been in a sales situation. I'm sure you have. As you're listening to this, I want you to think about a sales situation where you were talking to somebody, and even not a sales situation, could be even in your personal life, where you were talking to somebody and you both had, let's say, the same experience. You both went through something very similar, and bam, it's like an immediate connection with that other person. That's like-mindedness. So then the question becomes, how do we create these moments of like-mindedness during a sales process? Well, the first one is to use something I call verbal gifting. Now, verbal gifting is basically, look, too often we ask clients too many questions. It feels like an interrogation, and the client just kind of says, oh, I'm tired of these questions. But verbal gifting works like this. I'm going to give you a verbal gift, and then I'm going to ask you a question, and the rule of reciprocity says you're going to give me something back. Let me explain it. Let me walk you through it. It's really simple to implement because I use this all the time, and it works. When I'm talking to somebody that I don't really know for the first time, and let's just say we're talking about, I don't know, your kids are going to school, right? You know that they have kids, right? And let's just say that I would say, here's my verbal gift. I said, yeah, my daughter's over at the University of Georgia, and my God, tuition is just out of control. Now, that's the verbal gift. I just shared some of me with the client. And then I would ask the client this. I said, in your situation where your daughter's going, how's the tuition over there? Now, see, I asked that question because I gave him information. The verbal gift was I gave them information, personal story about my daughter and the high tuition rates. And how about your daughter? Are you experiencing that with your daughter? That person is going to feel the need to want to respond in kind, the rule of reciprocity. And typically what I'll get is something like this, yeah, Victor, man, I know what you're talking about. I know, because we're paying this amount, blah, blah, blah. Boom, connection made, like-mindedness. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think about this as you're listening to this podcast. What question can you ask your customer, and what gift could you share with them that you know you can connect with somebody with? For example, and I'm making this up, if you're selling, let's say, pool equipment, right? You're selling, things for a pool, right? And I bring that up only because I was talking to a pool company last week. And let's say I'm talking to a customer and I say something like this. I said, you know what? I said, when I first got my pool, one of the things I did was I used this brand of, filtration system. And man, I just had this problem, that problem, and that problem. I said, with the pool system you're using right now, with that filtration system, are you having any problems like mine or any similar problems? And maybe the customer will say, yeah, I'm having the exact same problems, Victor, because we're all having the same issues. And I'm asking you, what can you say? What can you share with your customer that you can then ask him a question and get that like-mindedness? Because all of a sudden, I share about my daughter and the expensive tuition, and the person goes, Victor understands me. I share about pool filtration systems and the problems I'm having, and they say, me too. And all of a sudden, there's boom, there's this connection. You can almost hear the snap coming together because, again, you're sharing information and you're trying to establish this like-mindedness. Another way of establishing this connection is to be brutally honest. Look, Mr. Customer, here's the deal. Here's how I see this. Here's how I see this. And this is why I think this. Now, you tell me where you think I'm wrong or maybe even I'm right. Now, that's being brutally honest. And again, I think what a lot of people want today is directness and honesty. Directness and honesty. I'm not saying be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. But be direct, be honest, be sincere. And I think people want that in a conversation. And again, one of the things I always encourage salespeople to do is to really listen. When I say listen, don't just listen for what is being said, the content. Listen for the tone of their voice. Are they speaking quickly? Are they sounding confident? Is there some questioning in the voice? Too often we worry about what they're saying and not how they're saying it. But back to like-mindedness. Again, if I can find touchstones, like points where I know that we have some commonality. That's the word also I want to tie into like-mindedness. I'm looking for points of commonality. If I can find points of commonality, that I'm going to connect with this customer. So here's what I want you to do. Practice verbal gifting. Share with them your experience and then ask them for their personal opinion. And I think you're going to feel that connection when they go, you know what? I'm going through the same thing too, Victor. I thought the same thing. Yep, that happened to me also. If that's the reaction you get, man, I'm telling you, you are connecting with your client. Anyway, that's it for this Sales Influence podcast. As always, don't forget to leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Let me know what you think. I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, check out my online sales training platform, the Sales Mastery Academy at salesmasteryacademy.us. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care.
Hi,
I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.